Hello, my name is John Pollock and I'm here to talk to you about Generation Z students. Gen Z students were born from 1995 through 2010. Although one of the youngest generations, they are starting to enter the workforce and are well entrenched in high school and college. They are an interesting generation that are very, very tech savvy. They are more cautious and less likely to take risks in life. They are more introverted than the generation before them and thus less likely to go to the mall and hang out or go to the movies. That being said, they are much more likely to use Instagram, Snapchat, or other social media platforms to communicate. But they are not necessarily adverse to face-to-face contact. As a matter of fact, they prefer it more so than millennials. In a piece from Forbes Journal, contributor Dee Patel explains 8 important ways that Gen Zers differ from the millennial generation before them. He cites security, competitiveness, independence, multitasking, even more than millennials, entrepreneurial, face-to-face communication, digital natives, and a need to be catered to. True to form, these specific traits are a result of the Z generation trying to fix some of the problems they see with millennials. 2 of the interesting traits that Dee Patel mentions are security and face-to-face communications. Gen Zers want security simply because of what they have witnessed in the recent past. They watched their parents go through one of the worst recessions in history and watch many people lose their homes during the housing crisis in the late 2000s. The resulting unemployment rates were staggering as well. They want job security, housing security, and personal security, which is why they are much less likely to take risks in life than millennials. Even though they are technology professionals, Gen Zers do prefer face-to-face communication. So heads up, educators and corporate America. Just when you got used to interacting with the millennial generation on digital platforms like Snapchat and Zoom, the conversation is coming back. Matt Kleinschmidt assembled a few infographics on Gen Z versus millennials for Vision Critical in their business strategy blog. One of his data pieces was the technology used by each group. As you can see in the graphic, Gen Zers prefer the mobility and convenience of the smartphone, whereas millennials still prefer the desktop or laptop. At the bottom of the graphic, you can see how each generation watches less and less television. Gen Z keeps the trend alive. According to the research, they prefer streaming services and online services like YouTube to get their viewing. This graphic displays the preferred social media platforms for the 2 compared generations. Amazingly, Facebook is still the ultimate preferred platform. However, look at each generation's second preference. Instagram, Snapchat, Vine, and YouTube all have significant more usage for Gen Z than a generation ago. It should be noted that these apps are heavily based in video-style communication. Twitter, which is the second preference for millennials, can handle video, but let's remember it was originally designed to post text. I thought this graphic was the most interesting. It essentially depicts how to get the attention of each generation. Research shows that millennials prefer a cool thing, a tangible object, whereas Gen Zers prefer a cool experience rather than some possession. I believe that this points to the Gen Zers placing a high value on their personal time, whereas millennials want something to show for their efforts. Also interesting in this graphic, on the right-hand side, is the decline in use of email and the almost non-existent use of standard post mail. Also, please take note of the increased use of social media. I asked John Haswell, the superintendent of Shadyside Schools, to weigh in on educating the Generation Z. He reacts to the following propositions. What is the best medium to educate a Gen Z student? What's the biggest difference between educating Gen Z students and the previous generations? And what do you see as the main focus of a Gen Z student, such as money, their time, or saving other people or things? Here's John Haswell.
Good morning. My name is John Haswell. I'm the superintendent at Shadyside Local School District. Also happen to be a parent of a Gen Z student. Mr. Pollock had asked me to video myself answering 3 questions. The first question he asked is, what is the best medium, whether it be video, face-to-face, online, or some combination, to educate a Gen Z student? My answer would be, in my experience, it would be a combination of both face-to-face and some sort of technology, whether it be iPad, Chromebook, laptop, or iPhone. I find that my daughter, when she does her work, see very little paper and pencil. Everything seems to be on a device. So my answer to that question would be a combination. The second question is, what's the biggest difference between educating Gen Z and the previous generations? Well, I come from a previous generation where there was no such thing as technology, and we did everything face-to-face, we did everything paper and pencil. Right now, there are so many different options that you can take with the students that are Gen Z students. Technology has really grown, and the ability for these folks to be able to learn in different avenues is great. And the whole world is at their fingertips when it comes to looking up or researching certain subjects. So the biggest difference is the world is at their fingertips, and in the past you had to dig a lot further and a lot harder to find out information. And the last question I was asked, what do you see as the main focus of the Gen Z student? Money, their time, savings, and other people or things. I can tell you social media is what I see as their main focus. They are on their phones 24/7, it seems like. My daughter is walking around the house with her iPhone, and she is talking to somebody, and it's normally on some social media platform. So there is no doubt in my mind with the Gen Z student that social media and interaction through social media is by far their main focus. Thank you.
So, with that in mind, it is important to keep a few ideas on hand when educating Generation Z. Goal number 1 should be to think digital. You should think digital in all facets of education, from assignments to assessments to general class presentation to any and all activities. Generation Z students thrive on digital formats, and educators should cater to this. Goal number 2 should be to chunk your lessons into smaller parts. Try to mimic those short videos on Vine or TikTok where the students are engaged, then have a chance to reflect. Just because your presentation is short does not mean the lesson is short. Let the students interact with each other. Remember, this next generation is bringing back the face-to-face conversation. And finally, a third goal should be to provide individualized instruction. This was a trend in past generation, but is critical now as members of Generation Z are looking for a more personalized experience. Thank you for spending some time with me today discussing the next generation to graduate and hit the workforce, Generation Z. Thank you to John Haswell for his input of the education of Generation Z. And the references for the infographics used at the beginning of this video are listed here. Thank you again.